Welcome to discussion number 3, it says, really? Maybe number 4, on prevention. And so the primer for the discussion today was just, thinking about all of the different things that we are trying to prevent and sort of where is the struggle in the prevention space. I think we've, I don't know about y'all, in my major classes, we're all getting a little bit tired of talking about COVID as an example, but at the same time, I think it's also perhaps a good example. So those of you that are here, tell me what you were thinking about the conversation today and where you might want to start. Don't all go at once.
Well, as I said, I thought we were doing like diet and, like exercise and things like that. But then when I read chapter 7, that wasn't at all what it was about. So
I think there are important prevention elements everywhere, though, right, Chris? And arguably, although I go round and round with one of the doc students, because years ago there was a hey, cheeseburgers are the new cigarette article, right, where it said that poor nutrition and inadequate activity was the leading cause of death. But when you look at the CD website, it does still say nicotine. But I would say that, overweight, obesity, poor nutritional choices, not moving, would still be the leading causes of death. So what might be some of the prevention issues there?
Being sedentary, you need to get up and move. Try to do something active every day for at least a half an hour, get your heart rate elevated.
Sure.
Diet wise, like you said, maybe a little less on the meat products and, eat more fruits and veggies. I've been vegan for 13 years, so I took that one very seriously a long time ago before it was like the popular thing to do.
Or this week, it's the Halloween candy, right? I brought it in and tried to give it to my students and they each took one. I'm like, guys, no, really, help me.
I went to a brief little party last night and they had pie and nobody would eat any. I was like,
everyone's trying to watch.
Okay.
Well, no, my colleagues and I we were joking about it, even though it wasn't funny, when we were all stuck teaching at home, right? I was like, I have not hit my steps because I'm literally just sitting here, and who knew teaching was so active, right? And now we're all back, and now we're all dying of sweat. My hair ends up in a ponytail halfway through every day because as soon as I go upstairs to teach, just the standing there teaching in a mask causes the sweat, right? And it's like, wow, we forget that there's some physical activity involved in just moving around the office, moving around the classroom. But what might be the issues? So in terms of getting folks to participate in prevention things. So Chris, since you started, what's the struggle with getting more people to adopt a vegan diet?
Oh,
she says with a really strong love of sausage.
Well, no. Well, here's the thing. My husband used to call me an AVP, which stood for Angry Vegan Princess, because the second I learned about all of the health issues that eating meat and dairy and all this caused, I wanted everybody to listen to me. And nobody wanted to hear it, especially when we're at the table eating dinner. So I learned to just start keeping my mouth shut and trying to kind of lead by example. But for men in particular, I think it's a macho thing. I mean, men don't eat salads for dinner or lunch. They eat meat and lots of it. And the more meat you eat, the more masculine you are. So I think a lot of it is attached to, the macho side of things. And then a lot of it is like my parents, my dad flat out said, I would rather take a pill and eat what I want than have to watch what I'm eating. So you have people who are set in their ways and, they just don't want to even consider other alternatives. And then you have other people who bought into milk does the body good advertising and, they just don't want to hear it. But truth be told, vegan diet has really very seriously corrected a lot of my health issues. So I haven't had an animal product in over 13 years, and I'm a living testament that you can survive without it.
Okay, I think Avery's hand was up, and then Autumn.
Hi, sorry, I'm in my car driving, and I'll join in as soon as I get home.
Yeah, that's okay. We'd rather you be safe than see your face.
Yes. But to the like whole vegan thing, I would say that another reason it would be hard for people to switch over to that lifestyle is money and like family wise and convenience. I feel that like meat and dairy products and everything like that is very convenient in today's like grocery stores. You walk in, like cheese, it's easy, you cut it up, serve it, you know. Like meat products are very convenient, like already prepackaged, made for you, ready, and like they're also cheaper. So like if you have like a larger family but you want them all to be vegan, I feel like buying the fresh vegetables and like even um like stuff like that and like preparing it would take more time and like it's harder for people like that. And I just feel like that could be like a big issue, is that like meat is so like meat and dairy products are so like pushed to everyone and so convenient for everyone that it makes it like harder to switch over to like the healthier alternatives.
Sure. So I'm going to pull us out just a little bit. So far we've talked about like our individual personalities, right? Or the ways in which we perceive ourselves might interfere with our ability to work prevention, ease, right? Or accessibility of resources, perhaps, I think is what Avery's saying, right? So if we have to find the vegan cheese, or I've been watching the Great British Baking Show, I think that was the one, and there's a contestant on there who's choosing to compete vegan. And so watching her try to make the pavlova, which is essentially a meringue with the, oh, Chris, what's the name for it? Where they use the garbanzo beans, aquafaba, thank you, to get the same, you know, and some of her dishes have been supremely successful and others not so much, which frankly works with animal products too, right? But so the either real or the perceived notion that the resources are easier or not would be another one. Autumn, what about you?
So I actually pulled up this CDC article, and it's not necessarily super current, but it's from 2014, and it was saying on there that southeastern states had the highest number of preventable deaths for each of the 5 causes, and in the five leading causes of death, that is. And I started to think, why would that be? Because it didn't really give a purported reason, and I think maybe it's choice, and maybe it's a bit of stubbornness, as you know, Chris and Avery were saying. I think culture plays into what we do in America a lot. I think maybe it's a bit of education, because until I took a nutrition class and really understood how a lot of the foods were so horrible for me, and I was like, you know, I'd go to the store and be like, well, I know this processed Hot Pocket isn't that great, but like, I don't think it's that bad.
Right. Yeah. Or what's like, in that hot dog, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
I was like, it was okay. And then I took the class, and then I kind of had an eye-opening that maybe you will not get until you get that education. But I think a lot of it is stubbornness, and we value free will, free choice. We have so many distractions in our world. And I know, like, my parents, I've talked to them about my concerns for many of their preventable health habits, not just you know, eating unhealthy. And I don't believe that they're ever going to change the way that they are, because I don't believe that they have they want to, maybe they know it's bad for them, but I think it's like the health belief model. They think that the perceived barriers, well, and the cons of changing that lifestyle will not exceed the benefits of changing it. And so I think they like their hot dogs, they like their processed white bread, and you know, their steaks, and I don't think they're going to change. But along similar lines of the vegan, I don't feel like I'm really super educated in that. It's, you know, funny, Chris, that you're, you know, saying like that it's totally changed your lifestyle. And I've gone back and forth from being gluten-free to dairy-free. But the USDA, they don't have any sort of, you know, guidelines as far as vegan being like the cure for many things.
Yeah, I mean, from a dietetic standpoint, you're not really going to find a vegan lifestyle is a little bit more difficult to get a nutritionally sustainable diet, essentially. But I think it's also about that, let's call it laziness, essentially, right? So like Chris mentioned, like milk does the body good, right? And we grew up in a culture where milk was where you got your calcium, and no one bothered to say like there's more calcium in a serving of spinach or broccoli than there is in a cup of, you know, that stuff that comes out of a cow's nipples that maybe we shouldn't really be consuming, right? And then even if we wanted to back up even further and think about the carbon footprint, right, and the whole global situation, because then even people for a minute they're like defaulted to almond milk, and it's like, well, what really has a larger carbon footprint, cow's milk or almond milk? And that's frankly debatable, right? So yeah, I think what I'm going to tease from that is also habit and routine, right, and culture. Olivia, what else do you think might interfere with our opportunity? We don't have to stay in the food vegan space, but what else might keep us from doing the preventative things that we know we're supposed to do?
I think maybe kind of along with what you guys were all saying, kind of just like lifestyle, what you kind of get into a habit and routine of doing. And like the more you do it, the more you become used to that, and you kind of become comfortable with that routine. And then once you're into that, you're kind of like, do I want to change? And maybe it might be a good change, but you're so used to it, you don't really want to change, or you don't maybe think about changing. And so then you kind of need to bring that to your attention, like, hey, there's some things, like even like simple things, like I think one of the things said like wearing a seatbelt, just stuff like that, you know, it can, yeah, it makes big differences, but just like, I guess routine is a big thing, but.
For sure, right? Like I wouldn't even fathom, I mean, it's a comfort thing for me as well as a routine, because sometimes I'll even, my old apartment, there was a stop sign and then you had to cross the street to get into my driveway. And sometime I'd be in a hurry and I would take my seatbelt off when I was stopped, and I'd be like, no, sister. And I would like put it back on just to get in. Because again, based on the work I do, you know, I think I'm risk avoidant to begin with, right? And so I hear all the, well, you're most likely to crash in your car 10 miles from your house. So probably right in front of your house is one of the most dangerous spots, right? So then it triggered my brain to like, no, keep it back on. But if we think about all of those different habits and routines, and you're right, I think, Olivia, you bring up another point too, which is, I think also what everybody's kind of been talking about is sometimes the preventative efforts are seen as time consuming, right? They take more thought, they take more effort, and a lot of times they're also less fun, right? I mean, if we think about if you did everything, so if you slept your 8 to 10 hours, right? If you ate all your nutritional appropriate guidelines, if you used sunscreen every day, all the time, even in the winter in Ohio, where my students will say, are you kidding me? And it's like the sun is still out, even though you're cold, you can still get skin cancer, right? Bicycle helmets, condoms, motorcycle helmets. That's another big one, right? Where people are like, gets to the freedom thing Autumn was talking about. It's like, you're not going to control me. I'm going to splat my head open on the highway if I want to, right? With masks and the COVID vaccine, same kind of thing, right? Like, don't tread on my rights by making me get this thing that's supposed to protect me and everybody else. So lots of conflicting things. Autumn, you look like you piped up. Your hand is still up, just so you know.
Oh, yeah, I just noticed that. I mean, I'll let someone else go first if they have an idea, but if no one has something to say, then I've got something to say.
Okay. Seems like it's all you.
Okay. So I kind of have started to wonder about something. When you go to turn the radio on, and most songs that you listen to, they're about romance, sex, and drugs. Those are the main topics. And I mean,
now we know what kind of music you listen to.
Well, I mean,
it's okay. Go ahead.
There's a lot of other music out there, but that's kind of the hip music, I guess. So, okay. You know, a lot of what's popular with the young kids, like as if I'm not young myself. So I've started thinking, like, why is that? Like, why is that what sells? Why is that what people will listen to and what's so heavily marketed? And that's because there's a demand for it, of course, but I think that in our society and with what we can do, we're in a lot of dopamine seeking behaviors all throughout the day, trying to do something that will make us feel good or feel excited, or and we don't really have a lot of willpower over that sometimes. So we want to do the fun thing, feel a fun way. So I think, and then I started questioning why to that. And, I think that maybe it may be tied back to a lot of people having anxiety in their lives or some form of depression, even if it's a milder form, and maybe boredom. So if you need those neurochemicals, the same reason that you would do drug-seeking behavior, because you don't have the right neurochemical balance in your mind, or you're seeking fun or something, and you're seeking it externally from outside of yourself.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I think the dopamine seeking is a universal, right? And especially if the things as health education specialists we're asking people to do are going to interfere with that, right? So there was like a moment in bad sexuality education where people said, like, there's no difference between sex with a condom and sex without a condom. And it's like, really? And then folks, like public health folks, tried that with masks too, right? Like wearing a mask on your face is no big deal. It's like, I call bullshit. Like, I'll do it anyways, but don't tell me it's the same. I don't breathe the same with the mask as without the mask. I don't sweat the same. I don't communicate the same, right? And so we have to be thoughtful about those barriers as well, because when we lie about it, right, if we're like sex with a condom and sex without a condom are the same thing, and it's like, no, they're not. And so then when we realize, first of all, that the person's lying to us, then we don't trust their information, and we're also diminishing the barrier to the behavior, right? So even when we say healthy food is more expensive than unhealthy food, and like some of us know there are ways to do healthy food inexpensively, but sure, in general, it is, especially when you're undereducated about it, it can be more expensive. It can take more time to figure out how to manipulate something differently, right, in terms of ingredients versus just grab the regular whatever. And so I think it's important that we recognize that. There's a pretty popular historical article in our field by Russell called "Are Health Educators Warriors Against Pleasure?" Right? And is it not our job to just make everything less fun? Like ride your motorcycle, but forget about the wind whipping through your hair because you'll be wearing a helmet, right? And you'll be wearing sunscreen, and you'll be wearing a seatbelt, and you'll only be driving the speed limit, and you'll be making sure you get enough sleep. And, aren't we actually cutting out the pleasure of everybody's lives? And some of that is because of poor education and not supplying think about when Chris started us off, and this was a life-changing thing, altering her diet. And that's a huge positive that sometimes gets lost in the weeds of like, what do you mean I can't just eat bacon? Or, right, I can't just go through the drive-through. I have to be a little bit more thoughtful about my choices. So how can we help people make those preventative changes that they might not be super interested in?
For me, it was just lead by example. To go from having a lot of health issues to having none and having more energy than I knew what to do with at my age, it spoke volumes to the people around me. Mm-hmm. I've had lots of people who have made comments, that they have seen the results of being vegan for me, and they want to know how they can do it too. Mm-hmm. It is not for everybody. It takes a great deal of discipline. I can honestly say that I have never been tempted to eat meat or dairy after giving it up. I don't crave it. I don't want it. But that hasn't been the case for anybody else who has asked, how do I do that? They've all gone back to a regular diet.
So your conviction is maybe a little stronger.
It has to be strong. It has to be very strong. I read a book, truthfully, it's called Skinny Bitch. And I got about halfway through it and I thought, oh my God, my husband's going to kill me. Like, I can't cook meat again. It's never going to happen. But really just, I think when you show people it can be done, that even after almost 40 years of eating, the standard American diet, you can change. It can happen. It's just research, and it is that strong conviction. But you really can't, in my opinion, if you tell me not to do something and then I turn around and see you doing it, you just lost all credibility with me. So you really have to be able to, not just talk the talk, but walk the walk.
Mm-hmm. So what might be places in our culture or society where we do prevention from a health standpoint well? Can you think of some examples of ways in which we've sold prevention? And some of this might date us a little bit, right? So I think like drinking and driving is a good example, but that's because I'm old, right? So my parents would drive through drive-throughs back in the day in the 70s where you just had your beer and you bought more beer and you kept on driving, right? Whereas young people now, thanks to a lot of efforts on health education, but probably Mothers Against Drunk Driving really doing more of a political, like emotional message, right? About the consequences of that, definitely shifted cultural norms and values such that even before ride shares, which now has made it way easier to not drink and drive, right? Where people then, nowadays we have a much deeper respect, most of us, for not making that choice, right? Versus it used to just be something that people didn't think about. Autumn.
Well, one example that I can think of for that is as I was learning in one of my classes about the smoking laws and the situation in Indonesia, and how they showed a video of a 2-year-old baby smoking.
Oh, you're frozen.
And then a lot of reporters, because this video went viral, because everyone in America was like, how would you allow that to happen? And my first initial reaction watching that's one bad mother that gave her baby a cigarette. No, a lot of reporters went over there, and that is the case. You can get a cigarette at any age. The law is that you need to be 18 years or old to get a cigarette, but the problem is that they do not enforce that law. So if you have a law and you don't enforce it, it means nothing. They have cigarette stands right outside of schools, but they have a lighter on a string, and they sell the cigarettes for 25 cents each. And you can buy them and smoke them. And it's marketed heavily. It's actually from American companies that bought the industry or whatever over in Indonesia when we started smoking less in America, and now they're making money off of it because they're utilizing a vulnerable population. But that in relation to America, I think that we've done a lot in education on smoking. I think there's still, I would like to have the cigarette boxes that have the ugly pictures of like ulcers and stuff like that on them. It's called the plain package labeling, I think, or something like that, that they tried over in England. And not the nice, pretty pictures that they have on them. Like there's some things that can still be done, but I think most Americans know that cigarettes are bad for you. And they know that they should not be smoking them, but if they choose to pick them up, they've been heavily aware of this. And the other thing in Indonesia, there wasn't a lot of resources for help for most people. There is a lot of resources for help for people that are smoking in America and want to quit, even free resources.
Yeah, thank you. The nasty packaging is supposed to be coming, but actually the brain science shows that the nasty packaging actually increases smoking. It doesn't decrease smoking. But really how we've changed smoking in the United States was through policy. So by increasing the cost. So among the Healthy People objectives several iterations ago was to bring the tax on a carton of cigarettes up to like 50% to 70%-ish, just to make them more cost prohibitive for people, especially for young people. Every time we increase the cost or the tax, fewer young people have access. And then most recently where we switched the age to 21 also increases that a little bit. So interesting. Yeah, I know the first time I thought that I saw that smoking baby too, I thought it was like a joke. And then I was like, oh, it's not just a GIF or whatever y'all call it. Olivia.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe like some of the stuff like we learn when we're like being little kids, and we're just kind of like reminded of that as we get older. Like I don't know if this is as much prevention as maybe it's more like just knowing what to do in that situation. But I remember like when we were little kids in like elementary school, we learned like the stop, drop, and roll thing. Like if you ever like if your clothes ever catch on fire, and I don't know if that'd be like more prevention though or not, but I guess just stuff like that, like when you're little kids, and then that's just like how you know, I guess. But
Better health education, is that what you're saying? I say hallelujah to that, right? So if we did spend more time learning how to not start behaviors versus worrying about it later, right? And also change the whole system. So it's a little bit difficult for us to teach, let's say, healthy nutrition in an elementary school or a middle school or a high school where they've got Pizza Hut and McDonald's in the cafeteria, right? And then Pepsi Cola has sponsored the scoreboard, so they can't turn the soda machines off at lunch. And, you know, Burger King has sponsored the textbook. So in math, they're looking at how much money you have left after you buy a Whopper and a large fries, right? And so this like indoctrination of capitalism, essentially, with some of our products, where we've got these competing resources, because school funding is one of those things that's difficult, right? So it's hard for a school to say like, no Coke, save your money, we'll buy our own scoreboard. But they can't always, tease out the support from the message then. So then if everyone's drinking Coke, or even we're a Pepsi campus, right? And it's like, why can't we be a water campus or a, a meditation campus, which I'm just being silly because they have to pick a vendor, obviously. But, as we're transitioning our food, those of you who aren't aware, we transitioned away from Airmark this summer and back to Kent State, which ultimately will probably be better, but has been transitional in a way that has not been great for our on-campus students. And in some of those ways, so our gluten-free dining hall is no longer, right? And then trying to find their healthy choices has just been a little bit sloppier. So I think also if we make that supportive environment, not just with the education, but also with the, we call it choice architecture, right? Grocery stores are supreme on this, right? They kind of make you think like, oh, the milk's all the way in the back and all the refrigerated stuff's in the back because then the electricity can be back there. And it's like, no, they intentionally want you to walk through the grocery store if you just need some cream or whatever, some vegan cream. Chris, I'm feeling very sensitive now. You have to walk all the way back there, right? And then if you look at the cereal aisle, like all the sugary stuff is right where the kids would be if they're sitting in the cart, right? The Raisin Bran and stuff is at the top and the bottom because they figure those of us that need to move will reach it, right? All the candy in the aisle and the things. And so, trying to help. And that's why the College of Architecture just tried to do this, if you've been in their new building, where they had, when you walk in the building, there's this huge staircase that announces like, this is how you get upstairs. And the students even complained at first, like it's hard to find the elevator. And it's like, well, that was on purpose because you have to drive around. And I know that's not great for those of us that might need a wheelchair to get upstairs. But it does help those of us that could then maybe choose the stairs just because they're right there. And maybe I'm too lazy to look for the elevator. So fine, I'll just walk up the stairs, right? Autumn, did you say there was a Walmart video that talked specifically about that? Was that you? Yeah.
Yeah, I used to work at Walmart and they actually had a whole training video talking about how they placed high profile snacks, the addictive ones like Doritos, in the middle of the aisle walking up to the store to try to catch their customers. And I mean, we may not think about it, but everything is so heavily marketed and based on a lot of psychology around us, like for marketing.
For sure. And I think there's a place we could get, I know this is in health coaching, but as health education specialists, that's why marketing and communication is among our competencies, right? Because we need to do a better job at getting our healthy message out there. Okay, we've hit our time. Is there anything else that we wanted to say or we thought was the last question was how our healthcare system contributes to this, but I put it in quotes, so I think I kind of gave away the right, that part of the conversation is often that we've gotten better, and I think the Affordable Care Act attempted to help with this, but our healthcare system is really more of a medical care system than a healthcare system. If we really dissect our benefits program, for example, as an employee here, though I do have access to a variety of different things. My quadruple bypass from eating too many meat products is totally covered. But my, working out with a trainer and or meeting with a dietitian who helps me with my dietary choices is going to cost me more money, which we actually do have the Center for Nutrition Outreach. So I'm kind of lying a little bit about that. But generally, there is a better, they're not paying for my meditation or my yoga classes to keep myself calm, but they will definitely pay for my surgical intervention to fix me when I finally fall down on my stress or whatever it's going to be. Autumn.
I'll let someone else go first if they have something to say, but if not, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else wants to say something. I've been gabbing a lot.
I think you're okay. We're at time, so.
I just my question was, especially since my majors in health education promotion, has there been more funding initiatives for health education promotion over the years? Because it seems to me that there has been an increased focus in this and increased funding, whether it be through grants, national grants, or whatever it is from.
Yeah, and here again, I would say that the Obama administration, which was one of the first ones that really facilitated, he was the first president to talk about prevention as a social justice issue and as a health issue. Unfortunately, though, his administration also felt like empirically based research was important, which I'm not saying that's a terrible thing, but to do new programming and try to seek grant funding for it, if you don't have any evidence it works, then you can't get the funding. It's kind of like with my students, right? They're like, I need a job, but the job wants me to have experience, but I can't get the experience unless I have the job. So actually, the most recent iteration, Healthy People 2030, has divisions now. So among the objectives, they have, I can't think of exactly what they're called, but there's a whole funding stream for programs that have not yet been shown to work. So like an experimental space where we can try more things. I think, again, coming out I don't know where we are in this pandemic. But I think we've learned a little bit more in terms of the consequences of dismantling our public health infrastructure over the past few decades, in terms of when we needed to ramp up an emergency response, how long it took and how much backlog there was in terms of catching up before. I mean, when we just hit over 5 million people died internationally now to COVID, and that's not even a good guess. It's probably might be as much as double that. While we were trying to get our act together to figure it out, right? So hopefully we'll learn from that even and move forward in each of these spaces. I've been sharing with my students that everything I know about COVID and managing a pandemic of that nature, I learned in the 80s from HIV, because it was almost exactly the same. Even in this weekend I was watching where the report came out about where did COVID come from, right? And then all the conspiracies around that, which we had the same things around HIV. And so it's that, it's a misquoted quote, but that those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it, right? So hopefully we learn more each iteration that we move forward. And I do think that if nothing else, the rising costs of healthcare are going to require a focus. And so that was that. And I appreciate, Chris, you were the first one to notice that link was broken. But that weight of an ounce article, and a lot of those articles will talk about, every mammogram saves this much money, every bicycle helmet saves this much money. So when you start talking to the people whose values are financial and you get that cost benefit space, then you have a place there, right? Especially if we start looking at a change like Chris made in her diet can ultimately save, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars just for her healthcare. Yet alone, if we just had, I read it one time and I can't forget the number, or maybe Chris, you remember it. If you just had meatless Mondays, if you just had one day a week where you didn't eat meat, I think it extends your life by 5 years and decreases our medical costs by hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's a basic, even if you want to keep loving meat or animal products on every other day, if you just gave up that one, even we could cause a ripple effect that could be really helpful.
Yeah, I always say you can pay for it now or you can pay for it later.
Exactly.
I mean, your food can either be good and healthy now and cost you a little more, or it's going to come back to you in medical bills. So
exactly. Yeah. Or quality of life or life expectancy or whatever it might be. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording just so we have a place to stop.